energy, technology, and policy. They go hand in hand every day. And as you see, we're back in the Austin studio. We talked to an expert that's running all three of those on this episode of The Crude Truth.
In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
This episode is brought to you by LFS Chemistry, committed to being good stewards of the environment and providing the tools so you can be too. NAPE Expo, where deals happen. Air Compressor Solutions. When everything is on the line, Air Compressor Solutions is the dependable choice to keep commercial business powered up. Sandstone Group. Exec Crew. Elevate your network, elevate your knowledge. Oil and Gas Workers Association. Pecos Country Operating. Fueling our future.
Well, hello, and thank you again for tuning in to another episode of The Crude Truth. Whatever the time of day it is, just thank you as always for watching and or listening. Always be sure to like, subscribe, and definitely connect with us on YouTube, LinkedIn, or even Twitter, or I think it's called X now. Well, as you can see behind me, we're back in Austin for another great episode. And surprise, surprise, we're going to have to talk oil and gas and a little bit of policy again today. But we're also going to mix in some technology. And on this episode, I'm just super, super excited because we have somebody on that deals and dives and fights for all three of these things for us every day as a pro oil and gas gentleman. Somebody that has been at Washington, D.C. fighting for us, somebody that's here in Austin fighting for us. He's in Houston. He's all over this great state of Texas and the United States, again, fighting for the oil and gas. My guest today is the president of the Energy Workforce and Technology Council, Tim Tarpley. Tim, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Ray.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for the delay. I was hoping to get you on in 2023, and I got a little sick, but thank you so much for coming back. I know you hail in the Houston area, right in the heart of the oil and gas, and but thank you so much for coming on. How's your trip so far to Austin today?
It's been great. Quick drive in and looking forward to spending a little bit of time out here in the Capitol.
Well, you know, you're going to be here. You're going to be fighting the good fight today. Yeah. For those of y'all, those out there that don't know of you, Tim, could you just kind of give them a little background about you right now?
Sure. I'm the president of the Energy Workforce and Technology Council. We're the National Trade Association for Energy Service Companies. Represent about 220 companies, big companies like Halliburton, Baker Hughes, and SLB that everybody recognizes, but also, you know, small and mid-sized well servicing companies that are out there producing energy every day all over the country.
Golly, man. I mean, the service companies, we can't do it without them. Yeah. And, you know, I always tell people, and I'm sure my listeners have heard me say this, that, you know, I always feel like the service companies get paid first because I don't drill a well unless I know I've got drill, test, and completion ready to go.
Right.
I can write the check. And then the service companies are like, no, that's not the way it works, man. And I'm like, well, but, you know, without you guys and without the Halliburtons of the world and the SLBs, formerly the Schlumbergers, we're not getting the work done. We're not maintaining the production actually that we have right now. Right. And, you know, I want to kind of read off a little bit about you because, you know, you're being too modest. So I'm going to read this real quick. You know, you've advocated for the men and women of the United States industry forever. I mean, for over the past 5 years in Washington and, like I said, around the country, your energy policy, and you've testified in front of the United States Congress, in front of the House Natural Resources Committee. So, I mean, you're not just, I mean, you're fighting every day, sir. So thank you so much for that. And, but, you know, here you mentioned on who you represent. What are y'all working on as far as there at the Energy and Technology, you know?
Sure. Well, the thing I really enjoy about this position is that the service sector is really the workforce of the energy industry. We represent our companies represent 650,000 workers in the United States.
Wow.
So when we go tell the story and advocate on policies, we're talking about those men and women and what they do. And they're the ones that bring us energy that makes our lives possible. So, you know, the past year or so, we've really been working on energy access. We have been pushing back on actions taken by the administration federally and actions taken at the state level that are going to make it harder and more difficult for those 650,000 men and women to bring the energy to the United States that we need.
Okay.
And the world.
Yeah.
I mean, and the world.
Well, you talk about bringing the energy to the world. I always say that, hey, as Texas goes, America goes, and as America goes energy-wise, the world's going to go. You're talking about bringing access to it. What's going on? Because I know on the operator side, hey, the regulations are getting more and more stringent. The policies that this administration is putting in place. What is it that y'all are doing to fight to get that access, for us to do more?
Sure. The biggest frustration and the biggest issue we've been working on is permitting reform.
Yes.
We need to speed up the permitting process in this country, or we're already starting to hit roadblocks. Yeah. There are areas of the country where we cannot move energy into. They're importing LNG into Massachusetts this winter. Now, just think about that. You have the Marcellus, what is it, 250, 300 miles away. You have plentiful natural gas, and we cannot get it from there to Massachusetts, where you have these urban areas that need gas. That is a failure of our policy.
Right.
A lot of that is because of permitting reform. And it's both federal and state. You can't get a pipeline through New York State. You can't build a new pipeline. So we have gas, but we can't get it to where people are cold and need it. That's a failure.
What is it about that? Because, for us here in Texas, 300 miles is basically, is a pert near from, Dallas-Fort Worth to San Antonio.
Right.
That's on a bad day, a 5-hour drive.
Right.
And if we can't have a pipeline that gets that from Ohio to New York,
right.
And the fact that we're using overseas, that's that's just ridiculous right now.
It's frustrating, and it's not just gas. We need permitting reform for building out hydrogen systems, building out all the new energies. We can't do it with carbon capture. We can't do all of that without permitting reform. So it's a roadblock for everybody.
Wait, okay, but wouldn't the carbon capture be part of the ESG? And you would think that there wouldn't be as many roadblocks for the ESG movement, right?
That's true. One positive thing that's happened recently is Louisiana was just granted privacy for Class 6 injection wells for carbon capture.
Yes.
EPA basically said, we recognize we are taking too long. We cannot process these in time. So they're allowing the state of Louisiana to process those applications. That's some good news. But Texas actually has filed to have primacy as well. We're still waiting on that. So the Railroad Commission is hoping that they'll have primacy here soon in Texas as well, which would be great. And
wow.
Would speed things up.
Are you guys helping out on that?
We are pushing for both the primacy on the Class 6 injection wells as well as permitting reform at the national level. I think they're both important, very important.
As far as the national level goes, again, I want to bring up ESG and I want to bring up the IRA real quick and just. Why is it, and by the IRA, I'm talking about the,
Inflation
Reduction Act. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Why is it that we have all these federal funds, but yet we do have all these policies that are roadblocking us right now? What is it that's going on?
Right. Well, as you know, there's a number of incentives in the IRA for infrastructure and for new energies. Many of those incentives could be helpful to the industry to build out things like hydrogen and carbon capture. However, when you're going out to get investment, you have a lot of regulatory uncertainty. You have, well, we can get this tax credit, but how long is it going to take you to get a permit?
Yeah.
Tax credit, it goes out for 10 years. That sounds like a long time, but if it's going to take you 7 or 8 years to get a permit, all of a sudden it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Holy cow.
So, to go out and get financing in that kind of scenario, it's not helpful.
No.
The other thing that in some ways is slowing the benefits of the IRA is that we've had significant inflation. Ironically, it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, but since it passed, we've had significant inflation.
Yeah.
So the incentives are not as valuable as they were when they passed it.
Yeah.
So there's a number of issues that are handicapping, what could be some benefits of that bill.
So literally the right hand is stopping the left hand from doing anything positive, and they're doing it to themselves.
Right.
Or they're shooting their own foot.
That's true.
Holy, I want to kind of stick on, and real quick, as we go, where's the website and how can people find you guys? Just as we go through.
Energyworkforce.org.
Okay.
We all the information we do, we run social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of that.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure, because I'll probably even ask you 1 or 2 more times during it so that people can get it. I know every now and then I watch different podcasts and they're like, are listening. They're like, well, where is it? What is it? You got to like go either way to the very beginning or the very end. So I'm like, yeah, just kind of throw it out there once or twice. But
Appreciate that.
well, but I want to get back to the this Biden administration, you know, and I use that term kind of loosely because I don't know who's running the country. That's just me, Tim. Like I'm not trying to get there with you or anything like that. But you know, they're now doing more of the impact on the LNG, and that's something that you guys are working real hard on right now and fighting against. Correct?
It is kind of a frustrating statement that came from the administration. As we speak about uncertainty with permitting reform, now we're adding another layer of that with LNG. They came out and said, well, you know, we're not so sure that we want to grant these permits as quickly as we have been. We maybe want to add an additional layer of a review to consider, you know, the environmental impact of LNG exports. Wow. Beyond that, we don't know what that's going to look like. So it's adding uncertainty to the market because no one quite knows what that review is going to look like. Secondly, you know, I think it's important to remember that Europe has come out and said that they believe that natural gas is a so-called green fuel.
Yes.
And they are incentivizing the use of natural gas.
Yeah.
And they've recognized due to the war in Ukraine that it's also a national security issue, that they need access to gas.
Yeah.
Right. So the Europeans, our allies, have realized that. And you know what? They're out there in the world looking for stable, reliable sources of that natural gas.
Yeah.
We're the most logical solution to that, and it benefits our economy, right? It all kind of makes sense.
It does.
But now we're saying, oh, we're going to take this additional review process.
Yeah.
So they're going to say, well, can we trust our contracts with the United States? Are they really going to build these and permit these LNG facilities that they say they're going to? So the Europeans are going to start looking for other sources. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So it hurts our national security, it hurts our friends and allies' national security, and it hurts the economy of the United States. Because when we produce the natural gas here in the United States, it benefits us.
Yes.
It benefits our workforce. It benefits our economy. If, you know, another country takes that market, it's going to benefit their economy, and we lose that opportunity. And so it doesn't make any sense to me, and it's quite frustrating.
Well, I mean, how do you, how do you add another layer of review on exporting? Like, you know, to me, when I hear that, it's like, okay, we need to make sure that the ship channels are,
Right.
or that the bay where the shipyard where the LNG facility is going to be. And it's like,
Right.
Are we doing the same things with wind farms? And the answer is no. They're bypassing all
Correct.
those regulations and reviews just to put up these offshore wind farms that are doing more damage right now to not only the mammals, but also our fishing industry.
Right.
So, and then I like how you mentioned that in Germany right now, they need it. I mean, their economy is set for another terrible year in 2024. They have, you know, I think they're now using less electricity. I think a stat came out maybe from David Blackman,
Right.
saying that they're now using less electricity than they were in the early 1980s.
Yeah.
And it's like, how's that possible when that's the way they want to go? But now they're, you know, with this war in Ukraine, all these pipelines are being not used over there, I guess, for whatever reasons. And we are still the #1 exporter. I mean, we flare it, for goodness sakes.
Right.
So it just blows my mind. And I'm glad to see that you guys are actually the ones fighting for that on a daily basis.
Well, and the thing that's really frustrating is if we want to talk about lowering emissions, the EIA, which is a nonpartisan, you know, entity in the federal government that does a review on energy, they have looked at it and they've said since 2005, the United States has lowered our emissions more than any other country in the world. And primarily the reason we've done that is transitioning coal-fired power generation to natural gas.
Yes.
So why would we deny our friends and allies making that same transition? It's going to lower the emissions worldwide.
Yeah.
So it benefits everyone. And if the goal is lowering emissions, why are we not doing the most logical step to do that? It's so counterintuitive. And unfortunately, I think it's really politics. I think, you know, the administration is concerned about their left flank. They're getting pressure from sellers saying, well, why are we approving all these LNG permits? You know, why are we slowing these down? And so it's more politics than I think it is than really trying to lower emissions. And that's really frustrating.
You know, you mentioned that it's more politics, and I can't disagree. I wish I could, because when you look at those large investment companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, they've lost trillions, and that's with a T, trillions of dollars on ESG in the last 2 and 3 years and investing in it. And, you know, sometimes I think that it's because of the ESG push by these policies said that they're not worried about about the financial return. It's like, we need to get these policies set in place for other reasons that, that's a whole other podcast to talk about.
Yeah.
And, but no, natural gas is probably the perfect, I call it transition of energy.
Mm-hmm.
However, we have enough natural gas to fuel the world for the next, 100 years.
Right.
And that's just here in America. That doesn't include what else is all over the world.
Right.
And so, I mean, it just blows my mind. So I agree, it's the perfect energy source, and it burns clean. And I'm glad you brought up the stat that not only has it, it's dropped the emissions here in the United States tremendously.
Right. And I think if your goal is lowering emissions and you don't include natural gas in whatever formula you're putting together, I don't think you're being honest with yourself. You're not being honest with the facts. And that's always what we try to remind folks of.
Man, what are some other policies that you guys, I know that's a big one for 2024. I had an opportunity to talk to Ann Bradbury a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, great.
And she had mentioned a couple of other policies that they're looking at. Are there any other policies that you guys are kind of focusing on this year that people can, reach out and support you guys?
So another thing we're pushing back significantly on is the administration's 5-year plan for offshore drilling.
Okay.
In fact, you mentioned that I went up to Congress. That's what I was testifying on behalf of, of that. They have set forth a 5-year plan that's going to have the least number of lease sales offshore in decades. So that is another action where they're slowing the ability for Americans to access our resources offshore.
Wow.
And as you know, the build out for an offshore a project takes, quite a while.
Yes.
So it's not going to affect our energy access next year, but it's going to affect it 8 to 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So we are handicapping, the next generation of Americans that are not going to have access to those resources because we're not doing the lease sales now. And that's not fair, and it's really quite frustrating.
No, it's literally going to hurt the next generation.
Yep.
And I want to stay on that because they're limiting our output, they're not limiting our production today, but they're limiting our production tomorrow.
Right.
And here we are. We've just now, and you and I talked about this in the pre-meeting.
Right.
That we're now, producing, surprisingly again during this administration, the most oil that we ever have. Saudi Arabia is now threatening to lower their the price, and Russia is still producing more oil with all these sanctions that they have, and we're not seeing the up and down influence like we always have. I'd like for you to kind of share a little bit about what we were talking about in our pre-production meeting about why that is.
Sure. Well, I think you pointed out right. We have a lot of geopolitical risk right now. We have a land invasion in Europe. We have Russia invading Ukraine. We have an issue in the Middle East where there's attacks on the Red Sea. 20 years ago, I think you'd see a very quick and significant jump in oil prices. We're not seeing that. And in my opinion, a big part of that is because of what the men and women are doing out in the Permian and in the other basins here in the United States. They're, like you mentioned, they're producing more oil and gas here domestically than we've ever done. That gives us a cushion for when there's an international issue. It gives us a cushion because we have supply. We need to keep making decisions that are going to keep that cushion there. Yeah. As soon as we take that away, all of a sudden we're going to be keeping our eyes on the news much closer because it's going to affect us like it used to in the 70s and the 80s. What we have done is improved our national security and our energy security here in the United States, and that really has happened since well stimulation has come into significant practice.
Yeah,
it's allowed the Permian to come back and do what it is today.
Yeah,
and we need to encourage that because it's good for all of us, and it's good for our economy and the next generation of Americans.
Well, you mentioned that it's like, I like how you put that. It's like, hey, man, this is a cushion that we're producing so much right now that we're able to at least combat, and we're not getting these high prices. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we technically have 3 conflicts now on 3 continents. The Russia invading Ukraine,
right?
The Hamas doing those horrific terrorist attack on Israel that's now turned into a war between them. And then Venezuela threatening Guyana down there in South America.
It's true.
I mean, it's getting closer. And not to mention, BRICS alliance is now gaining so much momentum as well.
It's true. And we can't forget that China continues to, threaten Taiwan. Can you imagine if we had a war in Ukraine and China invasion of Taiwan going on at the same time? All of a sudden, you have huge transportation problems all over the world. You have access issues all over. I mean, we need to remember the world it's an unpredictable place.
Yes.
And having production here in the United States, it helps cushion us from that unpredictability.
Well, I mean, but how do we, we need to, here we are today as we record, we're at $72 a barrel. Nobody is going gangbuster and drill, baby, drill. We're down over 100 rigs than we were this time last year. And so as we're producing, the service companies, again, I didn't think about it till just a minute ago. They're really right now the unsung heroes because they are maintaining all these wells across America that are producing they probably opened up the spigots a little bit more, opened up the choke, so to speak, and maintaining and really maintaining all these wells to get the production that we have. We're not producing and drilling new wells to replace anything that we have going on. I know the permitting is an issue. Is there anything else, other than us seeing probably $120 or $150 well before the big guys start drilling again?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point. I think there's two elements we got to remember. One, we're producing more and we're doing it more efficiently, and that's because of the innovation that has occurred. A lot of it has occurred in the service sector.
Yes, sir.
It's technology. It's doing processes better and more efficiently, and with lower emissions than they've ever done before. So we got to remember that part of it. We're doing more with just a less amount of equipment. Secondly, I think there's more fiscal discipline. I think all the companies in the space are being very careful to not go too far this time, right? Yeah. To not overproduce, to return money to shareholders, but also to keep more of a stable production increase. So instead of it going like this, and it'll maybe go more like this. And I think that's good. That's good for everybody. So the commodity cycle maybe won't be quite as extreme as it's been.
Man, that I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
I do want to throw you one curveball, something we didn't talk about, but you mentioned resimulation. I know here in Texas, it didn't even make it to the floor this past legislation, and I don't know much about how that all works, but a resimulation bill here in Texas, I know they were trying to work on it in a way to kind of help maybe give tax incentives for going back into older wells,
right?
Reworking them. And, I'm definitely as an independent, I mean, that's a pretty cool deal to get something like that. Do you think you guys could get on board and maybe look at helping out with something like that?
We supported that piece of legislation, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And there is certainly a lot of, there's a lot of capacity out there that you could re-stimulate, go back and bring some of these old areas back into production. That's good for everybody. It's good for the state, and it's good for America.
What do you think we could add as independents to that, or to get it at least to the floor for a vote? Is there anything in there that we can add to it as independents, or say this maybe like, hey, maybe if we add this to it or take something out of it?
Yeah, I think just politically, you just got to work on whenever you're changing the formula for income coming into the state, you got to figure out where that's going and where it's going to come from. I think it's just a numbers game, really.
Okay, well, I'll have to remember that. No, and other than making $1, which is the whole point to be an E&P company, I see the cities benefiting because you got some of these old oil fields with very small towns that might have a little bit of work going on, but you get a great resimulation bill, have some of these operators, those little towns pick up again. That it resimulates those economies, it gets them thriving again, and that's, to me, is one of the bigger benefits. It's like, what's the economic impact on some of these smaller cities that are all throughout Texas? All of a sudden, you kind of be driving on the back roads, all of a sudden you see fields of oil, gas, and then it goes away. And so that's another reason why I like them, and to kind of ask you about that resimulation bills.
Definitely, I think it's a good point. There are all kinds of small communities all over Texas that the oil and gas industry is really the lifeblood.
Yeah.
So providing a long-term sustainable option for some of these older wells, I think is great, and it helps support those communities.
Well, as we continue, as we go into 2024, and we see all these things that are going on right now, I don't want to ask you to give me a price of oil by any means, but what are you guys really going to focus on to help out and continue on in 2024?
So 2024, obviously an election year.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of talk about energy, national security, energy access. Yeah. It's just kind of been touched on so far, at least in the Republican primaries. It hasn't been as much of a focus as I think it will be in the general, especially if some of these conflicts continue into the general, which I think they will, unfortunately. Yeah. So we're going to keep talking about national security, energy access here in the United States, how the U.S. Energy security matters not only for us, but it also matters to our allies and friends all around the world. I think that's going to be the story for 24.
Okay,
that's what we need to be pushing.
Man, you know, Tim, you have the pulse of this entire industry going on, sir. What you guys are doing over there at the Energy Workforce and Technology Council is just amazing. And what you're doing, I mean, you know, again, your background is second to none. What a great person to have fighting here in Austin, and more importantly, out in DC when you got to get out there. I mean, you've worked for some great congressmen as well, and your staff is amazing. So shout out to the staff out there.
But we're blessed to have an excellent staff.
But I mean, you know, is there anything here as we wrap up? You know, one thing, you know, please tell the name of the website again for me.
Energyworkforce.org.
Okay. And, you know, anything else you want to tell everybody out there about you or about the organization as we move into 2024 and wrap up today?
I appreciate that. Well, I think what I want to say is really thank you to those 650,000 men and women of our sector. They're the real heroes. You know, it's our pleasure to tell their stories. And when you're talking to politicians, you know, folks in the executive branch, it's their story that matters. It's their story that they care about. You know, I go into members of Congress offices all the time, and some of them very interested in the meeting, some of them not. But how you really get their ear is when you say, sir or ma'am, there are 10,000 energy workers in your district. Here's where their facilities are, and here's what they do. Then all of a sudden their ears perk up. If they're a good member of Congress. If they don't perk up, then they're not a good member of Congress because they don't know what they're doing. But it's those men and women's story that really tells the story of our industry, and that's how we're going to connect with people. So that's really what we work on, is making that connection, because we have workers in all 50 states. For a while, we didn't have anybody in Vermont. It took me a while to find an individual in Vermont, but I did find them.
Okay.
So I can say all 50 states now, and that's amazing. Not every industry or sector has that kind of reach.
Yeah.
Many of them are just very, you know, geographically focused in one area of the country. We got people in all 50 states.
So you're telling me that the oil and gas industry is in all 50 states?
Yes.
And that's a crude truth.
Yeah. Not even just oil and gas industry, the service and equipment sector, just the sector that we represent.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And a lot of that's because of the supply chain. You know, building oil field equipment, you know, the supply chain's all over the place.
Yeah.
And that helps give us connections to people that otherwise maybe would, you know, think, oh, the oil and gas is just a Texas, Oklahoma thing. We don't touch that. Well, no, we got the data here. Actually, you do, because you know, it's here in your district. So that's, I think, real important for the industry to do, is show how important we are to the whole country, not just, you know, particular geographic area.
Man, I did not know that. And you've dropped some knowledge on me today. That is awesome. And again, I'm going to say it again. You've got your freaking ear to the ground, and you know this industry like there's no other, Tim. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Holy cow.
I appreciate you giving us the time to talk.
Well, I want you to come back on, and especially this year, especially since you said it's an election year. I mean, we you know, there's going to be policies and things like that we probably we could dive into more. I know the LNG one, that we could probably spend the whole time talking about that.
Oh, we could. And, we'd need another hour to talk about that issue. Yeah.
Probably would. And but no, let's have you back on. And Tim, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I think you need to run for Congress or something. I'm just saying. But Tim, no, thank you so much, and thank you to all our listeners out there. And we will see you again on another episode of The Crude Truth.
Again, thank you to our sponsors: LFS Chemistry, NAPE Expo, Air Compressor Solutions, Exec Crew, Oil and Gas Workers Association, Pecos Country Operating.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.